Warning: this video is not for the faint of heart. Viewer discretion is advised. Demonic possessions are by far some of the most terrifying stories on the web. The act of a dark entity taking over someone's body and all the horrors that accompany it. I hope you're ready. Things are about to get sinister. Number 1. This story is about my aunt. She was the loveliest woman that you could ever meet, and was a big influence in my life when I was growing up. I don't know how all of this started, but out of nowhere one day she just went crazy. Let me give you a bit of background. I am a 6'2", rather fit man. I practice Aikido and can bench press 240. My father and his brothers are pretty much as tall as I am, maybe less strong due to age though, and most of them have been practicing fighting sports for a long time. My aunt, by contrast, is about 5'2", and probably weighs about 110 pounds at best. She would get incredibly angry and out of control at random times, spitting nonsense words, and there would be absolutely no way my father or I, or even together, would be able to get her down. It felt like Dragon Ball Z Yamcha trying to get Perfect Cell into a UFC submission. She had about 10 times my strength. We needed to be 4 to actually pin her down and get her to stop moving until she calmed down. This was extremely scary, as she would just switch without warning, which was so out of character for her. I didn't believe in the supernatural, but my grandmother, a traditional Moroccan woman, was convinced that she was possessed. And honestly, it really felt like it. For those of you who don't know, Morocco has a pretty big culture surrounding the supernatural, sorcery, possessions and exorcisms, so most of the elders in the family firmly believe in it. However, at the time, the rest of my family were not buying it. We took her to the hospital and had some extensive tests done on her, because we thought that she must be suffering from some kind of seizures. But everything came back negative. Someone even recommended a psychiatrist, and although we took her there, it was of no help whatsoever. We were all becoming very concerned. So fast forward a few months later, and it was becoming way too difficult for us to handle. My uncle contacted a good friend in Morocco, who was an exorcist in his family. He asked us to do one very strange thing. He asked my aunt if she could put a drop of blood into a glass of water, and leave the glass somewhere in the apartment while she slept, but just nowhere near her, so that she didn't get up and drink it while she was sleeping. We were reluctant, but my grandmother insisted on her doing it. On the morning, the glass was empty. I personally am still convinced she just woke up and drank it, but in the Exorcist version, she was possessed by a demon, commonly known in our culture as a jinn. Giving him blood was just a way for you to welcome him and calm him down temporarily, and she needed to see an exorcist ASAP. Now we were getting convinced that he was right, seeing her often becoming crazier and crazier. In desperate times, sometimes you just choose to believe in a possible solution. So at this point, I decided to believe in what he said, and we had to get proof that he was right. We lived in France, and we decided to drive down to Morocco, which was a 1,500 kilometer drive, with a 6-hour boat ride, and then another 500 kilometers driving when we got to Morocco. During the drive, I have never been as scared as I am to this day. I was sitting in the back, my auntie in the middle and my dad on the other side. She went crazy at some point. We couldn't hold her down and she was trying to hit my uncle whilst he was driving. We nearly smashed into a wall, and my father had to dangerously choke her until she lost some strength. I know it sounds horrible, but she really was beyond it. So anyway, here we are in Morocco, getting to this village named Seferu, known as one of the biggest places in the country where sorcery happens. It's a rather creepy place, and not in a conventional creepy way either. What we all know of creeps are just what horror movies puts into picture, but the African creepy is on another level. We get to meet this exorcist guy, and he asks us to buy a sheep to sacrifice, and tells us that we should bring him the sheep's guts back for the exorcism to happen. My father and uncle take care of this, as I am absolutely petrified. As I stated earlier, I didn't believe in this. I decided to because honestly the situation called for it. But at this point, in a freaky, spooky village in the middle of Morocco, we were advised to never eat anything outside or accept anything from a stranger who might try and curse us, where everything looked twisted as hell. I was losing it, and really could not wait to leave this place forever. On the following day, we went to the exorcist's house and brought him these guts. He put them into a bowl and asked me if we were feeling strong enough to stay, as more people around would make it easier to exorcise. Well, I really wanted to leave, but seeing as everyone was staying, I stayed as well. My aunt was lying down in front of us next to the bowl, and we were sitting down around her holding hands, and the exorcist started saying stuff in a dialect that I couldn't understand. He gets sweaty and begins speaking faster, and I see my aunt twitching in what looks like pain. And then all of a sudden, all the lights went out. Holy shit, I think I peed my pants at this moment. The exorcist screamed something, and then my aunt screamed as well, and we were in total silence in the dark. I think the silence lasted for about 30 seconds, but honestly it felt like hours. The exorcist's assistant then came in with a lamp, and what we see is that both him and my aunt are passed out. The bowl is on the floor, and the guts are next to it. The guts had turned black. I'm not joking. They were red before the lights went out, and then they were black, as if they'd been singed beyond belief. I have goosebumps just remembering that and trying to picture it. The assistant urges us not to touch the guts at any cost. The exorcist wakes up and goes to put some water on his face, and then tells us to follow him. We went to a nearby empty hill, and when we reached the top, he asked us to burn the guts right then and there, as the demon was now possessing the sheep, and we could get rid of it. And that's exactly what we did. Since that day, my aunt has never shown any problems whatsoever. Her crisis period never happened again. Trying to remember this honestly scares the crap out of me. Just seeing her now gives me the chills, even though she is back to being the loveliest person I know. I am just so glad, though, that she is back to the way she was. Number 2. My family used to own and run a real estate office. My grandfather owned it and was the boss, and my mother managed the rent roll and the clients. I worked there on weekends as a teenager. We worked in a very multicultural area, which I always loved, and there was always a reasonable Maori Islander community there, and a lot of whom were very religious. In one particular property we managed, there was this one family who had 2 sons. One of them played football with my younger brother, and the other is the subject of this incident. So this kid was 11, I think, and according to the family was beginning to act strangely. he would have violent outbursts and say terrible, terrible things. Apparently he was seriously out of control, and the family called their Baptist minister and asked what they should do. Was there even anything that they could do? The minister told them that he was free one evening later that week, and that he would bring the things needed for a baptism. He said that he would perform an exorcism for them. As a good spiritual leader, good religious people, and a baptism could oust an evil spirit. The evening arrived, and the minister got all set up. He got into this deep tub that they all filled with water for the baptism. He chose some passages from the Bible that would help with the exorcism, and got the whole family together around to support and pray. Now, islander families tend to be large. There were aunts, uncles, cousins, and grandparents. Everyone was there and willing to help this child. The parents are instructed to bring out the kid, so the father goes to get him. But the kid was an absolute catastrophe. He was described as being like the Tasmanian devil from the cartoons, just all over the place. His dad put the boy over his shoulders and brought him down to where everyone was standing. The kid fighting at every step, but with his father being an absolutely enormous man, he didn't stand a chance. The minister said for everyone to gather around and put their hands on the child and pray for him. The father held him in the middle of the family group, and everyone reached out their hands to touch the boy who was thrashing around like a wild thing. What I heard was that it seemed like the boy was totally out of control. Time comes for the minister to say whatever he said, and then for them to get him into the tub for the baptism, which was supposed to expel the demon they figured was possessing him. The father and uncle or something were the ones who got him in the tub, and the family stood around praying their hearts out. But the boy tried to escape the second his body hit the water. He put up a crazy fight, and more family members came in to get him into the water. Finally, they got him in, and were able to hold him there, and hold him, and hold him, and hold him. They didn't mean to do it, but they drowned him. He was an 11-year-old boy on the cusp of puberty. Of course his behavior was erratic. Of course his attitude was awful. Of course he fought being held down by his own family. What did they think was going to happen? The parents, uncle and minister all got arrested. The uncle got off as an accessory charge. The parents got 10 years but were out sooner, and the minister got 15, and was in for the whole time because he was the leader. He should have known better. My mum had to go back and talk to the police and be a character witness about the family and the property and whatnot. Obviously, as we didn't know them all that well, we can hardly talk about the kid and whether he was possessed or not. But I can tell you that it was probably the saddest thing I've ever heard. And even if he was possessed, he didn't deserve for that to happen to him. Number 3. When I was 14, my best friend and I decided to use a Ouija board. We got into a dark room in my house and lit some candles and started the game. Another friend of ours knocked on our door when we tried to contact the spirits. We let her in and resumed. This third person kept mocking us as we tried to get the supernatural messages, when all of a sudden she passed out. We thought she was joking, but then she opened her eyes and began speaking in a voice that wasn't her own. It was very deep and guttural and damn scary. But we still thought that she could just be playing with us. She then laughed, a really horrible laugh, and started to say things that had happened to me, things that I had never told anyone before, and she did the same for my best friend. The candle started to flicker, and she began speaking gibberish. I couldn't even understand what was coming out of her mouth. We were absolutely terrified. This started off as a simple joke game, I thought, and then it got seriously out of hand. My friend then ran over to my neighbour's house. She was a very devout woman, and then she ran over to see our friend. She gasped and told us to bring her to her house. We grabbed onto her arm, and she fought us the whole way there, starting to scratch us and trying to get undressed. It was seriously freaking us out. When we got there, our neighbour locked herself in a room with the girl and told us to wait outside. I don't know what happened, but after a couple of hours, our friend and neighbour came out. She was very tired and didn't remember anything from the point that we were playing with the board. My neighbour told us to not play with what we cannot control. I'm not really sure what happened in that room, but I'm glad that my friend was okay. The bit that gets to me the most, though, is how she was saying all these things about me and my friend that she didn't know, that no one knew. It terrifies me to this day. Number 4. I've never known what to make of this. The high school I went to was a very religious private school. In the senior year, it was a tradition for the entire senior class to go on a religious retreat up into this remote resort in the mountains with a few of the teachers. The point of the retreat was to grow closer to each other and to also find God and perhaps experience spirituality. But in any case, they took our phones and forbade us from using any form of internet or communication with the outside world. Then they would make us go through a series of soul-bearing exercises and speeches and whatnot. Honestly, pretty cheesy stuff. Not that exciting. On the third day of the retreat, however, the entire grade is in the main hall doing an hour of silent prayer that was pretty much like meditation, but we were supposed to be communicating with God. All of a sudden, there's a huge crash, and everyone looks over to see a girl toppled over on the floor. As everyone stares, she starts writhing around on the ground and screaming, but not screaming like pain. The voice that she was screaming was a really strange, deep voice, and didn't sound like her at all. Someone yelled, "She's seizing!" I remember that because there was a girl in our class who was known to have epileptic seizures, and she would do it in assembly pretty frequently. But it wasn't the same girl. Then she stood up and started yelling in tongues. Her eyes were rolled up and her head kept twitching back and forth. She started to run around the room, yelling in an unintelligible gibberish language. And every now and then she would run at the cross in the middle of the room and then run back screaming and crying. At first, I honestly thought it was a dumb high school prank to freak everyone out. But if it was that, she took it way too far. The teachers tried to calm her down, but she just kept screaming in this weird language. She started pulling out some of her hair, and one of the teachers had to call an ambulance, but we knew that it would take them hours to arrive to get to this remote retreat. Another teacher tried to take her by the shoulders, and she dug her nails into his arms really hard and just kept screaming. It took several more minutes to calm her down. The teachers actually evacuated us from the room, and then she just went quiet. They took that girl away that night, though I don't know how or where they were kept because we were in the cafeteria after all of that. She never came back to school after the retreat was over. I wasn't friends with her friends, so I don't know if they knew what really happened. She was probably expelled for what happened, but maybe not. If it was a prank, it went on for way too long. but it was damn convincing if it was. She didn't seem like the kind of girl who would ever be up for anything like that, which is what strikes me as well. None of the teachers were allowed to talk about it when we asked afterwards. I just hope that she was okay afterwards. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. These stories are some of my favourites, and always leave me with a chill down my spine. If you liked the video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe if you haven't already for more true horror stories. Most of you in the last video said that you wanted either black-eyed children or skinwalkers in an upcoming video, so those will be coming soon. I'm also trying something new with my thumbnail art. Could you guys give me some feedback with your thoughts? I would really appreciate it. But for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next